28 years, the Namibian government has purchased 517 farms or 3 million hectares of land at a cost of 1.8 billion Namibian dollars to resettle the landless. The government boasts about reaching 62% of its target to purchase 5 million hectares of resettlement land by 2020. But a closer look at the numbers isn't impressive. You've resettled 5,300 people, but the people that you need to resettle are 243,000,
yes,
according to your own estimates.
Yes.
That is a 2% success rate. Some people would say it's actually a failure rate.
Well, it is. It has not worked as we wanted, as I said, because of those escalation of prices.
By an escalation of prices, the minister is referring to the impact of the willing buyer, willing seller approach to acquiring farms, which is enshrined in the Namibian constitution.
There's a very interesting historical reason why a market-based approach was tried out in Southern Africa. And of course, for Zimbabwe, it was part of the Lancaster House Agreement in 1980, which was the basis of independence. So it was a compromised independence that gave rise to a willing buyer, willing seller approach. And then the World Bank came to South Africa in the early 1990s and said we should follow the Zimbabwean model. Similarly, international donors and international financial institutions went to the Namibia Land Conference in 1991 and promoted a market-based land reform.
Why?
Well, of course, all three were negotiated transitions. Nobody won these liberation wars outright. There wasn't a revolution. These were negotiated transitions in which the status of property rights of white minorities were actually the centerpieces of those negotiations.
That was the compromise in order to give Namibia its independence. That was the compromise resolution. And the pressure came through the Western Contact Group. They had significant interest here. Of course, they wanted to protect. And as freedom fighters, we were also tired of staying in the bush. It's better to fight from inside rather than from outside. And that is a strategy we adopted. Let's go home and let's negotiate and see what we can do in the process.
How do you then respond to criticism today that former liberation movements like yourselves sold out?
No, definitely not. As I said,
that you over-compromised?
No,
that
never.
You shouldn't have accepted willing buyer, willing seller?
No, there was no other alternative. We were fighting. You were fighting the Western countries with sophisticated arms, sophisticated technology. And you are just a freedom fighter carrying a gun on your back.
According to government figures, Namibia has transferred more land into middle-class black hands through the Affirmative Action Loan Scheme than it has through its resettlement program for the poor.
Most cabinet ministers do have a commercial farm.
Willem Odendaal is a lawyer at Namibia's Legal Assistance Centre, specializing in land litigation.
The ratio between land being made available through the Affirmative Action Loan Scheme process and the resettlement process stood at 1:4. So for every one farm that has been made available for resettlement purposes, 4 farms were made available for the two Affirmative Action Loan Scheme farmers.
The Minister of Land is unabashed about being a beneficiary of government-owned Agribank's loan scheme.
Ministers can apply through the bank, Agricultural Bank of Namibia. I did the same. I applied for a loan. I had a few animals and I'm farming. And farming is not that you just get a farm. You must be willing to work. It's hard work, commitment.
Do you work on your farm?
Yes, I do.
Is it successful?
Well, it's not successful, but at least I'm making some progress.
He tells me his cattle farm has doubled in value to more than 2 million in the time he's had it. Omitara resident Frida Namboya made no such progress in her brief experimentation with farming. She became a beneficiary of land reform when she was resettled on a government purchase farm in 2014. 36 years old at the time, Frida, a former farm worker and mother of 10, was allotted land in the Omaheke region, some 200 kilometers northeast of Omitara. She was among a group given a patch of ground and goats to breed.
Frida het gesê dit was ver. Ver van waar?
Is ver van hier af en ons het nie inkomste nie so baie want dit sal beter gewerk het is daai projek farm moet naby gewees het van hier af en ons het kinders wat skool gaan, daar's 'n skool daar nie.
Was daar huise waar jy kon slaap en bly?
Daar's nie huis nie, ons bly net langs bome.
So when you go to some of these resettlement farms, what you find essentially is that people are there squatting on a piece of land that they're unable to farm, mired in poverty, and it's quite a tragic sort of situation that they find themselves in.
Want die omgewing even is nie goed vir bokke nie. En is 'n sand, nee, die cloud, hulle raak lang en dan begin die bokke loop met die knie. Ons het met die baie bokke gegaan, maar soos ek
Hoeveel?
Myne was 19 bokke wat ek saamgevat het.
Waar is die bokke nou?
Hulle vrek.
But some have succeeded. Those who got 19 goats, as you say, if you look after them very carefully, in a year or two they will multiply. But some families always like to depend on government for handouts, and that is also another challenge which we need to address.
I asked Frida if they had received any kind of training.
Ja, ons het in een dag, one day's training gehad.
The Namibian government appears to be moving further and further away from its post-independence promises to transform poor black lives through land reform.
What has in fact happened now is that the government seems to be aiming towards creating a black middle-class farmer.
Soos nou, hierso in hierdie omgewing, daar was 4 plase wat gekoop het. En die mense wat word geresetter, is die mense wat kan self 'n plaas bekostig.
The challenge is that sometimes we buy very expensive farms. Some of the facilities, those who were run by our white compatriots, are quite sophisticated. You cannot just bring a person from an informal settlement, put him there, and hope that he will succeed to farm. We would like to resettle people who will really make a significant contribution to the GDP.
How do you respond to those who resent the fact that you're a minister, you can look after yourself, but you're benefiting from land reform, and that land reform should actually be benefiting the poorest the most?
If you give a farm, a very expensive farm, for example, to a poor person, how will he run it?
But with support,
Yes.
they would be able to run it.
No, not
If your
everybody.
loan was given to a poor
Everybody,
person
not
and
everybody.
he got all the support, the training, the support, and they were willing to work hard, surely you could uplift some people out of poverty.
Well, you see, development doesn't, even it has been proven everywhere. You have to develop your middle class, you have to develop the entrepreneurs, you have to create that culture. And then through that, you get more revenue, and with that revenue, you help the poor.
This year, Namibia is set to hold its second land summit since independence. It's been postponed several times. The minister expects expropriation and ancestral land rights to dominate discussions.
When we started our land reform program, we went to Brazil. We looked at what they did with their affirmative action. We went to Zimbabwe. We went to South Africa. We are sharing all
But do
these.
you make the same mistakes?
Well, it's difficult. It's a trial and error.
I think the time for error, or the margins for error, should come to an end now, and we should move on to be serious about about the agricultural sector.
Yesterday, former liberation movements used the land to gain support, used the land question to popularize themselves, got the support of the ordinary person, got international support. They used it against the whites, and the enemy was the white man and the white woman. They got into power. People remember that yesterday, you and I were speaking the language of land return and land reform. What has changed today? You have assumed the place where the white man was, and you don't care.